Do you really know the people around you? How often have you walked away from a conversation completely drained, like someone had sucked the life right out of you, and you couldn't explain why? And isn't it strange how you sometimes carry guilt that was never yours, believing there's something wrong with you, when in reality you've just been absorbing other people's projections? Or maybe you've promised yourself you'd finally break free from toxic cycles. Yet somehow you end up back with another manipulative, controlling, or emotionally unstable person. So tell me, how long will you keep calling it bad luck, when in truth there's a hidden pattern quietly corroding your life from the inside out? Nietzsche had already spotted this invisible danger. He knew the greatest enemies don't show up armed. They show up disguised as ordinary people. The worried relative, the smiling friend, the harmless coworker. Their unconscious slips into your mind, and before you even notice, you can't tell where you end and they begin. And let me tell you something, there's nothing wrong with you. The problem isn't that you're too weak. It's that you haven't yet learned to recognize the real thieves of your vital energy. Today, you're going to meet the 7 most dangerous figures Nietzsche called out in his works, and you'll finally see how they might be shaping your life without you even realizing it. If you've ever felt drained after a simple interaction, guilty for no reason, or stuck in toxic patterns you swore you'd never repeat, you've already tasted the poison Nietzsche warned about. And the unsettling part is this: the people who carry that poison never announce themselves. They don't walk in holding a sign that says, "Careful, I'm here to ruin your life." They show up as advisors, as friends who just want the best for you. Sometimes even as family members who smile while tightening the leash. Nietzsche believed life should be embraced with courage, but when you get too close to people consumed by resentment or weak morals, your strength gets drained instead. The subtle, little by little, you start to feel smaller, heavier, like you're carrying a burden that isn't yours. That spark that should drive your projects, creativity, and courage, the will to power, gets stolen right under your nose, leaving you doubting yourself. Think of those people who always find a flaw in what you do. You show excitement, they find the but. You share an idea, they remind you why it won't work. By the end, you're not energized, you're exhausted, second-guessing your own worth. And here's the scary part. It doesn't feel like an attack. It feels like concern. It comes wrapped in smiles and soft words, which is why you don't notice the corrosion at first. Nietzsche called this the slave morality. People too weak to affirm their own strength flip the script. They turn their impotence into a fake virtue, and then try to convince you that being small, submissive, and obedient makes you good. Ever had someone laugh at your big dreams? Not because they're unrealistic, but because your courage reminds them of what they never dared to chase. That's slave morality at work. And the danger isn't immediate like a mugging on the street. It's poison in small doses. Slowly, you start to carry guilt for things you never did, shame for desires that are completely natural, and confusion about what you really think. That's when someone else's unconscious starts invading your mind. You repeat phrases that aren't yours. You believe in limits that were never truly yours. So before we even put names and faces on the 7 most treacherous figures, you need this foundation clear. The world is full of people trapped in resentment, nihilism, and herd morality. If you don't learn to spot them, you'll keep bleeding energy without knowing why. And when we finally reveal these 7 types, don't be surprised if you realize you've already crossed paths with more than one. Maybe even closer than you'd like. And once you start looking closer, these dangerous faces take shape. The first one, the resentful. Oh, you've met this guy, bet on it. He doesn't stand up and fight. He'd rather stash away grudges like trophies. He collects tiny injustices and whispers to himself, "One day I'll prove I was right," but that one day never comes. Instead of action, he breeds a poison that slowly seeps into everyone around him. The resentful is a master of flipping values upside down. Whatever he lacks, he calls a weakness in others. If he doesn't have courage, he'll say boldness is recklessness. If he can't love, he'll claim love is naive. You've seen this before. Someone who can't move forward but has a PhD in blame. He manipulates you through guilt, and before you realize it, you're apologizing for things that never even needed an explanation. Picture a coworker who never had the guts to start his own business. The moment you share your idea, he shoots back, "That's just greed. Better be happy with what you've got." The tone is moralistic, almost like he's saving you from a mistake. But the truth? He just can't stand watching you risk what he never dared. That's the trap. The resentful doesn't want to rise above. He wants to drag you down, because your win is a painful reminder of his loss. From the resentful, we step into the second dangerous phase, the herd moralist. This one doesn't just store poison. He preaches it, loud and clear, as the holy book of mediocrity. Nietzsche said the herd suffocates instinct, and that's exactly what this guy does. He creates invisible rules so no one dares rise above average. He's the one who squirms when you break patterns, because to him, living means obeying. Here's a simple example. You decide to travel solo, explore something new, and the herd moralist chimes in, "But isn't it better to travel with family?" Or you invest in an expensive course, and he cuts you down with, "Unnecessary, you can live fine without that." He turns his own cowardice into a universal law. It's not about you, it's about him. But the way he says it comes loaded with fake authority, like it's written in stone. The problem is, if you're not paying attention, you buy into it. This moralist can't stand freedom because it exposes the cage he lives in. That's why every bold move you make feels like a threat to him. You become a danger to his fragile balance. And the scariest part? He doesn't attack you directly. He hides behind the collective. Everybody does it this way. Nobody thinks like that. And before you know it, you're defending your own freedom as if it were a crime. But hold on, we're not done yet. There are still more faces just as treacherous as these two. After the resentful and the herd moralist, another figure shows up, maybe even trickier, the idol worshiper. At first, they look harmless. They're always carrying a guide, a master, or some perfect system to follow. And hey, there's nothing wrong with seeking inspiration. The problem is blind devotion. Nietzsche called out these false gods because once you idolize them, you stop owning your life. You've seen it, it's that friend who won't take a step without quoting a guru, a sect, or even a brand. This type of person hands over all the power that should be theirs to the object of worship. They don't need to think for themselves. Someone's already doing the thinking for them. The danger shows up when they try to drag you into the same submission. Instead of discussing ideas, they parrot sacred lines from leaders or books without reflection. The message isn't, "Find your own way," but "Follow my way," because if you go alone, you'll fail. A real example? That group at work that treats the boss like a god. Any critique becomes heresy, any disagreement a betrayal. Slowly, creativity dies out, because there's only room for the idol's word. Idol worship suffocates. And if you don't notice, you start censoring yourself, talking less, thinking twice before being authentic. It's not admiration anymore. It's the erasure of your own strength. From the worshiper, we move on to the passive nihilist. This one doesn't worship anything. In fact, he doesn't believe in anything at all. He lives numbed out, dragging himself through life like he's half asleep. Nietzsche said nihilism shows up when old values collapse and new ones don't take their place. This person has lost the spark, and worse, they spread their apathy to everyone around them. Ever been near someone who drains your energy just by existing? The nihilist is a pro at reducing everything to ashes. You talk about a project, and he shrugs. What for? It all ends anyway. You share a dream, and he mutters, that won't change anything. It's not constructive criticism. It's a vacuum that swallows every trace of enthusiasm. The danger? That emptiness is contagious. Being around them is like breathing smoke. You don't see the damage right away, but your body gets slower, heavier, lifeless. Nietzsche warned that this state is the most dangerous because it looks calm. The nihilist doesn't fight, doesn't confront, he just exists without pulse. But in everyday life, that paralysis spreads like a virus. You walk into a conversation feeling alive and leave hollowed out. And if you're not paying attention, you start to believe life is just about getting by. But here's the thing, we're not done yet. There are still more masks, just as toxic, that you've probably brushed against without even realizing it. Among the most treacherous faces is the slave of opinion. Easy to spot. They never act from themselves. They live only through the reflection in other people's eyes. No applause? They freeze. Nietzsche criticized exactly this kind of person, the ones who don't create their own values. Because when you live like that, you're not breathing authenticity, just playing social theater. And here's the kicker. They don't settle for staying on the surface, they drag you there too. After all, if they don't dare to be real, why would they ever let you be? A real example. That person who posts every little detail of their life online, not out of joy, but out of fear of disappearing without likes. Deep down, they measure their very existence by someone else's ruler. Spend time with someone like this, and suddenly everything turns into performance. Ever felt pressured to show off more than you actually lived, just so you wouldn't look less? That's the slave of opinion infecting you with neediness disguised as connection. The bigger problem? They force the same rule on everyone else. If you dare not to care about status, they call you weird or out of place. If you choose to live at your own pace, they whisper, "Nobody does it that way." They can't stand authenticity because it exposes the mask they're wearing. Little by little, you start hesitating to be spontaneous, fearing judgment, when in reality, the only one in chains is them. From the slave, we step into the fanatic of absolute truth. This one doesn't crave approval. He thinks he already holds the final answer to everything. Nietzsche saw this dogmatism as an enemy of life because it strangles creative doubt and kills plurality. The fanatic doesn't discuss, he preaches. You've met someone like this, always armed with a definitive explanation, as if the world were a closed book. That's the type. The danger is how he poisons relationships. Instead of opening space for dialogue, he shuts it down. No nuance, no room for experimentation. If you dare to question, he reacts as if you've committed a crime against cosmic order. He's that coworker who, instead of debating, slams the table and declares, "That's how it is, period." You don't grow around someone like that, because every inch of ground has already been paved over by the truth he defends. And the trickiest part? Sometimes the fanatic even looks wise, precisely because his answers are quick and firm. But real wisdom doesn't come from certainties. It's born from the courage to doubt. The fanatic smothers that courage, reducing life to catechism, as if existence were some fixed manual. Stay around him too long and you start believing that thinking for yourself is wrong. And yet, we've still got one last face to uncover. Maybe the sneakiest of them all. After so many masks, we finally reach the figure Nietzsche saw as the greatest danger of all. The small man, what he called the last man. He's not an obvious villain, doesn't carry open poison. His danger lies in his comfortable mediocrity. He's the one who avoids pain, dodges risk, and settles for tiny pleasures. He lives numb, as if life were nothing more than staying safe, never daring. The problem is, this way of living doesn't kill you outright. It slowly dims the flame. Nietzsche said when men become last men, humanity stops creating, stops climbing mountains. Destiny flattens into a shallow plan. No effort, no overcoming. It's as if every true conquest gets swapped for distractions. As if the fire meant to move the spirit is traded for fleeting sparks. You've seen this all around you. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche painted this figure with irony. The last man blinks. A hollow, resigned blink that symbolizes someone who no longer cares about anything grand. They don't want freedom, they want comfort. They don't want to transcend, they just want to survive. This is nihilism at its peak. Not the emptiness that hurts, but the emptiness that numbs. Nietzsche pressed the question, is this really our future? A society where no one dares anymore, because daring hurts, where courage gets swapped for the illusion of safety, where greatness is treated as a threat and mediocrity becomes the rule. Chilling, isn't it, that a portrait written in the 19th century feels more like a prophecy of today than a relic of the past? And the most unsettling part? Nietzsche doesn't hand us easy answers. He doesn't give a manual to escape. Instead, he throws questions back at us, poking each reader. And you, are you content to be a last man? His works are uncomfortable mirrors, showing not only others but the places in us that cave to comfort, fear, and conformity. That's the shock we need to hold on to before moving forward. Because if spotting these 7 dangers is tough, facing the fact that pieces of them live inside us is even tougher. The real challenge isn't just who to avoid, it's how not to become the same. And standing in front of this picture comes the most urgent question. If all these types live around us and inside us to some degree, how do you keep from becoming one of them? Nietzsche never handed out pre-chewed answers, but he left razor-sharp reflections that, when put into practice, work like antidotes against these corrosive forces. And that's where the first actions begin. The first practice is for dealing with the resentful. If you hold on to grudges, sooner or later they rot and poison you. Nietzsche said resentment paralyzes because it chains you to the past, stuck in what never was. The antidote? Turn the wound into work. Write your anger into a journal. Push your body until it sweats. Create something that carries that pain. Once you turn resentment into movement, it loses its grip and becomes fuel for something bigger. Think about artists like Van Gogh or Frida Kahlo. They took their pain and turned it into paintings that still move the world centuries later. They could have curled up in self-pity, but they chose creation. You don't need to be a painter. You can write, start a project, compose music, or simply stand up and act where before there was only complaint. Ask yourself, what can I do with this anger that lifts me up instead of dragging me down? That answer is already the start of healing. The second practice is for the herd moralist. This type lives by imposing inherited rules, and the temptation is to bow down. Nietzsche pushed for the opposite. Create your own law. That doesn't mean childish rebellion. It means conscious disobedience. When you say no to what suffocates you and yes to what expands you, life starts aligning with your truth. The exercise is simple but powerful. Ask yourself, if no one judged me, what would I really choose right now? That single question cracks the moralist's spell because it removes the weight of the collective gaze. Answer honestly, and you've already broken free of the herd. Could be something small, wearing clothes you actually like, turning down an invite that doesn't fit you, switching careers without waiting for family approval. Every act of authenticity is a brick pulled out of the wall that holds you back. The moralist will try to guilt-trip you, but that's where you prove your freedom. Finally, the third practice, facing the idol worshiper. Nietzsche once declared, God is dead, not as some cheap shot at the divine, but as an invitation to kill our false gods, the leaders, gurus, or ready-made systems we cling to so we don't have to own our lives. The practical exercise? Doubt even what comforts you the most. Don't accept ready-made truths without chewing on them, questioning them, testing them. Only then do you feel the real weight of freedom, moving from follower to creator. The first practices already paved the way, but now we step into the 4 toughest actions. Because spotting the poison is only half the process. The other half is turning every drop into vital force. Nietzsche didn't want you to become an echo of his ideas, but someone who affirms life in the flesh, even when it burns. And that's exactly where we face the passive nihilist head-on. For him, the answer is a more fatty, love your fate. Not love in some sugary sense, but the kind that embraces even what cuts. Nietzsche believed greatness is born when you say yes, not only to pleasure but also to the suffering that shapes you. The exercise is simple. When something bad happens, repeat to yourself, I choose this too, because it's part of my path. That shift changes everything. It stops being tragedy and turns into a forge. The slave of opinion demands a different strike. Nietzsche summed it up in 3 words that thunder like a storm. Become who you are. Anyone who lives for applause never truly knows themselves. They're just actors on someone else's stage. The practice is to start small. Choose something just because it resonates inside you. A secret hobby, a change of style, a book read without an audience. That quiet training teaches you to live from the inside out, not as a reflection of the crowd. With the fanatic of absolute truth, the way out is almost an inversion. Embrace doubt. Nietzsche didn't see eternal truths, only shifting perspectives. The fanatic kills life because he turns thought into stone. The practice? Experiment with lightness. Ask yourself, what if the opposite were true? Allow yourself to change your mind without shame. Laugh at the certainties that yesterday felt untouchable. Doubt here isn't weakness. It's oxygen. And then we come to the small man, the sneakiest of all, because he lives inside each of us whenever we cave to comfort. Nietzsche saw in him the symbol of the end of striving. The remedy? Seek the risk that makes you greater. Not reckless leaps, but deliberate choices that scare you because they promise growth. Ask yourself, what am I avoiding because it's hard, but would lift me higher if I faced it? That question draws the line between those who merely survive and those who truly live. Together with the first 3, these 4 practices don't make a checklist, they form a calling. Nietzsche didn't want disciples. He wanted warriors of life. The world will always have resentful ones, moralists, and small men. But the question is, will you let them shape you, or will you turn every drop of poison into power? That choice isn't for tomorrow. It's for the instant you decide not to shrink. Nietzsche said the greatest poison doesn't come from those who attack you head-on, but from the ones who silently convince you to live small and deny your own strength. These 7 figures don't want your freedom, they want your surrender. And every time you bow to them, you give up the greatness you were meant to live. So the question is simple and cutting. Are you going to keep giving in to poison disguised as care? Or are you going to choose the strength that's already inside you? Will you stay stuck in cycles of guilt, exhaustion, and toxic relationships? Or will you finally have the courage to break free and walk your own path? Trust the ones who fuel your fire, never the ones who put it out. Life's way too short to waste around people who only know how to drain you. No more living for other people's approval. No more settling for emotional scraps. The world doesn't need more tamed souls. It needs you whole. And now it's your turn. Who are you going to cut off after hearing this? Which masks are you finally ready to see without fear? That choice is what separates those who merely survive from those who rise higher. If this video hit you, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. And stick around. There's another video on screen right now that'll take you even deeper into this journey you just started. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.